So we'd said that you get either a solar or a lunar eclipse during an eclipse season. So the eclipse seasons are these month-long period of time, and the month-long period of time happen to be roughly 5 months and about 3.5 weeks or so away from each other. And so each one, if you get a new moon or a full moon, you will get an eclipse of some sort. Now, sometimes the eclipse is going to be a partial eclipse in which the shadow misses or what have you. Sometimes a total eclipse. Well, since the new moon and full moon always occur 2 weeks away from each other, then if you get an eclipse right near the middle of right near the beginning of an eclipse season, it'll be a partial eclipse. An eclipse near the middle of the eclipse season might be near total, and an eclipse near the end might be partial. Or you might get two partials, one kind of partway towards the beginning, partway towards the end. So that means you'll always get at least 4 or 5 eclipses of some sort every year. Now, they're not always good eclipses. For example, 2020, there are 5 eclipses. Right at the beginning of the year, it's the tail end of one eclipse season, and it's a partial penumbral lunar eclipse. Now, that's pitiful. Partial penumbra, the moon just barely hits the Earth's penumbra, and so that means all that you see is the moon's less bright than normal. Most people would never even notice it. So only die-hard astronomers would even bother looking to see, is there any chance you noticed it was any different? And besides, you couldn't see it except across the Indian Ocean or so forth. So that one was not a particularly exciting one. Another one, about 5.5 months later, another partial penumbral. Okay, I guess 5 months later, another partial penumbral. Again, a very pitiful one. Okay, but just 2 weeks later is a very wonderful annular eclipse. But you'd have to be across Africa or South Asia in order to see that particular annular eclipse. And so, but that would be an annular eclipse, and then right at the end of that eclipse season. So this was near the beginning of the eclipse season, middle of the eclipse season, end of the eclipse season. Then we had a partial penumbral. It actually happened July 5th. It happened this past summer. Happened across the United States. You could have looked up and seen nothing. Okay. Basically, what would have happened is you would have noticed the moon was just a tiny bit less bright than it normally would have been that night. Okay. Well, a little bit of haze, volcanic eruption, smoke from fires, pollution, even light pollution, street lights or so forth, would also change the apparent appearance of the moon. And so virtually nobody except a die-hard astronomer would ever be able to even tell that anything was happening. Okay. And even then, only part of the moon would be slightly dimmer. And so totally boring. There will be a much nicer penumbral lunar eclipse visible across the North American Pacific Ocean area. So the moon will be sort of setting as this is happening. And what you might notice is one side of the moon is quite a bit darker than the other side. But it's not going to be overwhelmingly impressive. So that will be something you could see. And that's sort of towards the beginning of the next eclipse season, which includes December 14th, which will be a total solar eclipse right across South America. So if you got, no plans and just feel like it, you could go to South America right about the time of her final exam, and there'll be a total solar eclipse running right across there. So this is a NASA eclipse bulletin right here, and you can see that it runs right across South America. It would also be visible in the South Pacific, and it also be visible in the South Atlantic if you're in the right spot. If you're not exactly the right spot, you would have a really deep partial eclipse. Okay, so what about Texas? Well, like I said, this past This past July, we had a penumbral lunar eclipse. There'll be another penumbral lunar eclipse. I mean, the one in July was a partial penumbral. There'll be actual penumbral in November, right at the end of November. Total lunar eclipse next year. So May 26th, total lunar eclipse. And that will be visible definitely for us, okay? And then a partial solar eclipse in October of 2023. Okay, so that partial solar eclipse, again, it's not going to be total from here, but it will be partial, and so that'll be a very good, deep partial eclipse. And so that'll be a good one to look at, and so that's going to be really cool. Okay, and that's a dry run for one eclipse season later, in which there will be a total solar eclipse visible from Tarrant County. Now that's actually significant because back in the 1800s, there are records of a total solar eclipse visible in Tarrant County. Late 1800s, there were not very many astronomers in the United States, and several astronomers from other parts of the country came to Texas. There were no astronomers, no professional astronomers in Texas at all in the 1800s, and so they came and set up telescopes just outside of Fort Worth and made the very first professional astronomical observations in Texas. In fact, it was some of the very first professional science done in Texas. And that happened right here in the Fort Worth area, just outside of what was Fort Worth at the time. It's currently just somewhere between the medical district and TCU. Is where that used to be outside of the city, but that's about where it is, you know, if you were to go there and look now. But that was the very first observations. Now, the interesting thing is this 2024 observation is going to run perpendicular to it, and is going to intersect here across the same area. And so we will be having telescopes set up to watch it. Now, one bad thing. April. It rains a lot in April. So there is a chance we might get rained out. But we will be setting up telescopes and trying to observe it. And if it looks like it's going to be rainy, then, you know, I mean, if it looks like it's going to be clear, then I'm going to have telescopes set up, and we'll try to put out press announcements and so forth. We're going to be doing this and observing things, and so you're welcome to come observe. But if it's going to be rainy, just letting you know, I'm going to just pack up the telescopes and drive as far as it takes, hopefully, until it's clear. Because it's really cool and really exciting to see a total solar eclipse. And I'd like to see another one. That particular eclipse path is given right there. And again, these NASA eclipse paths, they mark where it's total, and then the magnitude nearby, and they also mark the contact times. So we've got the penumbral contact times down here. We have the umbral contact times. That's what you really care about right there. That tells you when it starts and stops, and then we have a lot of other data on there that's probably not that useful to you. It's useful to me, but that gives you kind of roughly what to expect. Okay, so that's the very next total solar eclipse visible from the Tarrant County area.